What's up, guys? So in today's video, we are going to go over how you determine a property's value or how to run comps on a property using Zillow.com. Now, the principles that I'm about to show you here when we jump on the computer, you could use pretty much across all of those platforms like Redfin.com, Trulia, Realtor.com. There are a number of different platforms where these principles will apply, but I'm going to be using Zillow because in terms of like the widest net that's out there, Zillow definitely is in the most amount of markets. Certain markets Redfin doesn't service, Trulia the same thing, Realtor.com the same thing. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, but before we do, I do wanna mention that I would highly recommend considering getting your license as a real estate investor, because when you're a licensed real estate agent, even though there is more accountability and there are some pros and cons to it, the fact is there's nothing better than the sold data directly from the local MLS. So if you can get access to that either by becoming licensed or partnering with a real estate agent, that's definitely gonna be your best bet. But a second alternative and a very good one is using Zillow.com and what I'm about to show you. So let's go ahead and jump on the computer now and I'll see you there. Okay, guys. So for the sake of this tutorial, I decided to use a property that's located in Indianapolis, Indiana. I chose this property for a couple of reasons. First, I have the most direct personal experience in this market. To the date of making this video, I actually hold the managing broker's license for the state of Indiana, and while living there, I happen to work for one of the largest real estate wholesale companies in the nation for close to 3 years. At the time I left, we were averaging buying and selling about 30 properties per month, so needless to say, I'm very experienced with this market. Secondly, this particular property at 1913 Orange Street is located in a very hot investor market called Fountain Square. There are a ton of rehabs and investor activity in this area, so I thought it'd be perfect as an example for the tutorial today. Before we dive into any details, I want to go over a few things with you. 1913 Orange Street, the property that we're using today, is what's known as a subject property. This is the official term for the property that we're trying to determine the market value for. Our main objective when it comes to determining an ARV or after repair value or market value of a property is to use what other very similar properties known as comparables or comps for short have recently sold for. The target we're aiming for when pulling these comps is to get as close as possible to our subject property. So similar square footage, bed-bath ratio, architecture style. The ideal situation would literally be the exact same house with the exact same lot size and floor plan right next door to our subject property that sold today. Obviously, this is close to impossible to find, but the principle behind pulling these comps is to get as close to the scenario as humanly possible. That said, there are some people who are more strict on certain aspects of the comps that they pull than others, and the way I'm pulling comps is what has worked for me in Indianapolis. An example that comes to mind is the age of the property. Some people might want to keep their comps within a certain range of say 10 to 20 years of the year the subject property was built, but I personally don't find this relevant because if you're going to rehab a property to the standards of a brand new property, including updating the plumbing and all that, then it shouldn't really matter how old your property is. Obviously, you take into consideration the extra rehab costs if your property was older, but determining your rehab cost is separate from determining your ARV. You need both to determine your maximum available offer or MAO, the amount that you can comfortably pay for an investment property. But this video is only covering how to determine your ARV or your after repair value. In the description box below this video, I have a link to a blog post that goes into detail on how you determine your rehab costs and a whole lot more from the perspective of a real estate wholesaler. So go ahead and check that out. Getting back to the point, this video is by no means all-inclusive. It's just an example of what I do so that you can leverage my experience and get started easier than I did. My biggest advice would be for you to sit down with a local real estate investor who is seasoned in your market and ask them what aspects of comps are essential where you invest. That way you never get any surprises. Now with that, let's go ahead and pull some comps. So this spreadsheet here is actually a template that's going to be available for you for free. If you go ahead and check out that blog post link down below in the description box that I mentioned earlier, you can just download it there. How it works is I've created some formulas here where once we go over to Zillow and we grab the 5 comps, we're going to use their average square footage as well as their average sold price to determine your true ARV. Now with that, let's go ahead and jump over to Zillow and I will show you how to grab these comps. Obviously, we're going to go ahead and go to www.zillow.com. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to simply copy and paste the address into the search bar. This is going to pull up our particular subject property, and we're going to grab some basic information and put it on our spreadsheet. We are looking for the square footage, the bed bath ratio, and the architecture style. So this is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. 3-bedroom, 1-bath. The square footage is 930. And in terms of architecture style, again, certain people are more strict on how exact the comp has to be to the particular property's architecture style. For me, I just care if it matches whether this property is a single story, 2-story, duplex, triplex, or quadplex. That's just my personal preference. Some people care if your particular property is a bungalow, for an example, to only use other comps that are bungalows. They'll also pay attention to things like whether your subject property has a detached garage or not. If your subject property has a detached garage, some people will only pull comps that also have a detached garage because, again, the idea, the principle is to get as close to your subject property as possible. For me, I just find that using a 1-story or 2-story kind of baseline works just great. Again, the best thing for you to do is simply figure out what other seasoned real estate investors are doing in your market and just do that. So this is just simply 1 story. And now I have my baseline information on my subject property. I'm now going to go ahead and try to find 3 to 5 comps. I do want to mention that the more comps that you have when you pull the average of your square footage and your sold price, the better off you're actually going to be. I don't think that it's practical to sit there all day long and just pull like 10, 15, 20 comps. But if you have the time and you have the data, more power to you. But from a general, just kind of a ballpark, I think 3 to 5 is a good place to start. Going back to Zillow, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to update the search criteria. So we're going to go over here where it says listing type, and we're going to take all the properties that are currently on the market. We're going to take off all of the properties that are coming to the market, and we're simply going to highlight properties that have recently sold. Next, we're going to go here to where it says bed, and because our property is a 3-bedroom, we only want to look at 3 bedrooms or higher. And then in home type, because this is a single family house, we don't want to look at apartments, condos, townhomes, manufactured homes, or lots. We just want to look at other single family houses. Next, we go to this more category. We do 1 bathroom because, again, our subject property is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. And in terms of the square footage range, some people say that you should go 300 to 500 below your subject property's square footage and 300 to 500 square feet above. I think that might actually be a little excessive because, again, you want to get as close to your subject property as possible. So if you can get 5 comps that are within 100 to 200 square feet of your subject property, that's ideal. Everybody has their preferences, but just for the sake of example, we'll go 300 below and 300 above. So this is 930. So that would be 630 and then 1230. So again, our subject property is 930 square feet. So we're going to go 300 below and 300 above. Now, I do want to mention too here about lot size. Going back to what I was saying, some people, match bungalows to bungalows or ranches to ranches, and some people really have a thing about lot size. If your subject property happens to sit on a half acre, then it's probably wise to match other properties that sit on a half acre. I personally am not going to do that with this particular property because I know that it's in a residential neighborhood and they're going to be relatively the same and it's not going to have that much impact. But if your property happens to have a pretty large lot size, that is something to consider when it comes to pulling your comparables. So the next field that we are going to change in terms of the search criteria is sold in the last 6 months. Now, some people will say that if they can't find a lot of comps that have sold within the last 6 months, then they won't invest in that area. And I would caution you against that because the truth is there happens to be certain areas of town that just might not have a lot of activity. It could be a well-to-do neighborhood where when people move there, they just don't move very often. If it's lower comps, if you know the area is kind of rough and has higher crime, and then there's not a lot of comps, then I wouldn't invest in that area. You kind of need to use your local knowledge to determine where you want to invest. For me, if I'm going to run this analysis and and there's not going to be a lot of properties that come up, I would probably, knowing Fountain Square, think it was a fluke and I would pull up to a year. But again, the ideal situation is you want to get as close to your comps selling today or yesterday. Like, you want it to be the most relevant recent data as humanly possible. So 6 months is a great range, but if you have to go up to a year, I don't think that it's a big deal as long as you're familiar with the area of town and you know that it's well to do. Now that we have our search criteria updated, let's go ahead and hit apply. All right, now that we've gone ahead and done that, we're gonna just keep an eyeball on where our subject property is roughly located. So here's Orange Street, and then we're gonna zoom out on the map. And guys, here's a prime example. I know that Fountain Square is a fantastic investor area, but Zillow simply doesn't have the sold data available for me to run my analysis based on 6 months. So I'm gonna go ahead and update the search criteria to up to a year because I know that this is a great area to invest in. So that at least gave us something. In an ideal world, I would have comps closer to downtown Fountain Square and Fountain Square proper, but I don't have it available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Hoyt Avenue property, and then I'm going to go a little bit more east and see if I can get some more properties to come up. Let me see if I zoom out a little bit more. There we go. We got some things happening here. Something I do want to bring your attention to. Do you see this river and you see this highway? I would encourage you to be very careful with drastic changes in landscape like a river or a highway or a train track. Those things can actually significantly change the look and feel of the market. Everybody's heard, I grew up on the wrong side of the train track, right? That saying is in place because sometimes on one side of the train track, it's a really nice part of town, and then on the other side, it's a really bad part of town. So you definitely want to be careful, but because again, I have insider market knowledge to this area, I know that if I pull comps here and down here, I'm not going to be that far off. And here in a little bit, I'm actually going to show you guys how you can factor in kind of a margin of error when you run your analysis. So let's go ahead and grab some of these properties. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm actually going to use this draw feature, and I'm going to draw around my subject property. Again, ideally, I wouldn't be crossing this river, but I know the area. It's going to work for my situation, but you have to have local knowledge of the market you invest in. Otherwise, you could get really hurt going across a highway or going across a river. So we'll go ahead and apply. And there we go. We have 12 results, which is fantastic. Something that I love about the draw feature within Zillow is that all of the properties that are now within this circle that I drew are located right here on the right-hand side, which is perfect. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is that when you pull comps, I would use the cheapest search filter, not the newest. I think a lot of the times Zillow defaults to the newest properties, but for what you're doing as a real estate investor, you obviously want to be more conservative. So if you can pull from the lower end of the comps in your area, that's better because it's more conservative. Something I do want to highlight though is you don't want to grab the lowest properties or the most expensive, because in this area you have properties that are a legitimate comp but that sold for $174,000. You want to kind of get an average of what's typical in the market. There are outliers, so somebody may have gotten a great deal selling a property for $4,500, and somebody may have found a buyer that just fell in love with the property and bought it for something super expensive. So I would not be using this property at all when I pull my comps, or this property or this property. I'm probably going to start from this 29,125. So let's go ahead and finally pull some properties. So we're going to go here. This is 1,035 square feet. It is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. In architectural style, you go here. And here's something about Zillow. Unfortunately, sometimes information's inaccurate. Sometimes information's just not there. You gotta kind of just do what you can. Again, if you have access to your local MLS, you get the most accurate data that's available. I do see though that the architectural style is a bungalow, so I know that that is a 1-story. So I'll just go ahead and put 1 story. And now for our sold price. So it sold for $29,125. Something that I do want to mention about the Zestimate here is Zestimates are kind of hit or miss sometimes on how accurate they are. Sometimes they're exactly spot on and they're awesome. And I know that Zillow is really working hard to try and make this extremely accurate, but they have their work cut out for them. It's really hard to figure out what properties will sell for based on an algorithm. So my encouragement to you is don't rely heavily on the Zestimate. I would just focus on true sold data. Okay, let's go ahead and grab another property. All right, let's check out this one. So 1406 South Oxford. It's really nice when you can see pictures on Zillow. Sometimes you just can't and you have to work with what you have, but this is really nice because I know that this is not rehabbed. So I wouldn't actually use this particular property when I'm pulling comps because I'm trying to look at properties that are renovated. So let's skip that property and we'll check out this one. Perfect. You can tell by the picture that this has been renovated. We'll go ahead and use this one. I'm going to go ahead and grab the rest of these comps and then I'll jump back on here in a second. All right, I got our 5 comps and I got everything centered and organized. So let's go over our calculator real quick just so you understand what these numbers are. So our average square footage, Google Sheets is pulling from comp 1 to comp 5 and then adding them all up together and then dividing them by 5. So we're getting an average square footage for the neighborhood. Then we're doing the exact same thing on the sold prices. Then we're dividing our average square footage by our average price so that we get an average price per square foot, which is $51.10. Then what we're doing is we're multiplying that by our actual square footage size. So $51.10 by 930 square feet for a gross market value of $47,525.84. Here's where I really think, especially if you're a real estate wholesaler, you really need to take this home. You want to put in a buffer percentage as a margin of error. You can adjust this as you want to with the spreadsheet that you can download for free. You can put this as 15%, 20%, whatever you feel comfortable. I know that 10% for me is a good ballpark, but again, you got to know your market. You got to know what your risk tolerance is. And then this is simply 10% of the gross market value, and then you're going to subtract that. And there we go. So guys, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. For more real-world guidance on how to crush it as a real estate investor, come join us at REtipster.com. We have tons of tips and tricks and content, videos, podcasts, everything that you need really to thrive as a real estate investor. The link is below in the description box, and I'll see you there.